This is episode 3 of the podcast Communicate Like This. The title of this episode is Core Values and Principles. If this is the first episode of the show you'll listen to, I encourage you to stop listening after this intro and instead go to episode 1 titled Listen to This First. Clever name for that, eh? After listening to that, I'd encourage you to listen to the episodes in numerical order. Later episodes will make more sense this way since they'll often refer to lessons learned in earlier episodes. Just a heads up that the next minute of this intro is a repeat of what you have heard in previous episodes that sets the context for the entire podcast series. So if you've heard it before, hang with me for a few more seconds, or just fast forward until you get to the real new episode. Thanks. Welcome to this podcast called Communicate Like This, and everything will work better for everyone. Really, that's what I'm trying to accomplish. Make things better. Hardly anyone has ever been trained in how to communicate effectively, even though communication is foundational to getting through life. So, most of us are amateurs when it comes to talking, even though we've all got a lifetime of experience at talking. As a result, our world, business lives, and personal lives are fraught with miscommunication, misunderstandings, preventable arguments, and stress, among a much longer list of bad consequences related to ineffective communication. I want to break that dynamic by providing people some tools that they can use to achieve a true mutual understanding among the people they communicate with. So, thanks for tuning in and becoming part of the communication revolution. Look for new podcasts with communication tips and techniques about once a week. If you can successfully learn and implement the communication tools we'll talk about over time in this podcast series, both your personal and business lives will improve. I'd like to start this episode with a big thank you to all of you who've been providing comments on the show. I'm incorporating most of them to make this podcast better. Of course, when you're dealing with lots of people with lots of different learning styles and likes and dislikes, nothing is going to please everyone at the same time. But I'm looking to grow the audience by broadly appealing to everyone interested in learning tools to reduce misunderstandings, miscommunication, arguments, and stress in order to make your lives easier. Please keep those comments coming. On the website, communicatelikethis.com, you can simply click on the Read More link under the media player, and a comments box will appear at the bottom that you can fill in. Today we're going to talk about some relatively dense material. That is, material that's packed, and I mean packed with information. Now, some of you like to listen to the show all at once since it's only about 20 minutes long or so. However, understanding that different people have different learning styles, and we'll talk about the communication tool of accommodation in later episodes, I've added a couple of breakpoints in this episode for those of you who don't want to power through it all in one sitting, or at least need a break. So when you hear the musical bit that normally opens the show during what follows, that'll give you an easy heads up to pause or have a way to return to that point if it's appropriate for you. Then you'll have some time to reflect on what you may perceive as dense material coming your way all at once before powering ahead. In this episode, I'll provide you what I think are a powerful and universal set of core values and principles. And I really mean universal. They apply to everyone, everywhere. You'll find that some businesses have defined values and principles. I think you'd agree that the problem here is that they often don't actually have their actions in alignment with their own core values and principles. Ever hear that customer is king? Right. Another problem with core values and principles is that real live people, like you and me, in their personal lives, seldom really have any stated or defined values and principles. You may inherently understand who you are and what you're about, but have you ever actually written that down? Could you put down on paper the values that drive you? And could you winnow that list down to just the top 5? Because if you don't know what your values are, how can you act in alignment with them? You've got to know. Or, to steal one of my favorite lines from the original Dirty Harry movie, I gots to know. A defined set of values and principles creates expectations for you to live by. If you incorporated them into the language of daily life and reiterated them in as many forms as possible, you'd find that you'd start using them even more. Not that they need to be recited like the Pledge of Allegiance right after you get out of bed every day or something, but what if they became a natural part of discussions when ideas are thrown around? For example, at work, you might say something like, "Hey, Gene, your idea to involve the sales department in our team was right in alignment with that value of respect. Thanks." I often get asked, what's the difference between a value and a principle? The answer is not much. While there are technical differences, from a practical perspective, they're really just about the same. They're both big picture statements that guide you through life and help separate right from wrong and good from bad. In my view, principles are states of action, while values are states of being. Principles depend on values. So let's start with values. What do you believe in? Values are more character attributes like honesty, respect, integrity, and accountability. Principles describe big picture actions that'll be taken, like communicating effectively, truly prioritizing, simplifying, and aligning actions with principles. Principles give you the ability to answer the question, why am I doing this task? If you can't relate your actions back to a given set of principles and values, then you just randomly go through work and life without real meaning. The Ten Commandments is one of the more widely known sets of principles. The United States Constitution is another, for the most part. These documented principles have demonstrated their importance over time to provide order and structure for the groups that profess to act in the fashion described by the principles. I'm asking that you do something similar for your personal life. Principles are the mom and dad of work and life. In the classic case of siblings in an argument with one another, one of them eventually says, "Oh yeah? Well, I'm telling Mom." Now, Mom would usually settle it, though sometimes not in an expected way. When you get into a conflict or disagreement with someone, the first place you need to go to for advice is the values and principles. You need only ask each other if whatever action under discussion is in alignment with one or two specific applicable values or principles. If it is, then go ahead. If it isn't, then do something different that is in alignment. If you can train yourself and others to rely on the values and principles first, of their own volition, you'll have fewer people knocking on your door at work who need your input. That essentially creates more time for you and less stress. Learning takes repetition and practice. As I present information in alignment with that truth, you may feel hammered over the head with these core values and principles, but it's only because so many different situations arise with spectacular regularity that involve them. If something's wrong, look to a misalignment with one or more of these core values and principles as the cause. If you want to take the next step and fix something, look to employ one or more of them overtly in your conversations. Then all will be right with the world. Well, maybe it's a bit more complicated than that, but hopefully you get my point. If you get nothing else out of this podcast, understand and internalize these core values and principles to build your life around. They'll last you a lifetime. Here they are, right after the break, should you choose to take one. We're back after the break, although if you didn't hit the pause button, it wasn't much of a break. Let's dive right into those core values and principles, starting with values. The first is teamwork. I define teamwork as all people understand their respective roles in a given situation and proactively work to help other people succeed, with a coaching mindset to maximize each other's potential. Now that's a mouthful and sort of business speak, so let me simplify it a bit. Teamwork is helping others succeed. This gets to whether you're in this life just for you or for others. But that isn't an either-or choice. You can do both. But if you're in it just for you, then all you're doing is using other people. Most people resent being used. So I'd encourage a balance between those two. Help you and help others. Next is integrity. The definition here is all people do what they say they will do, and when they say they will do it. Now, this involves some subsets of characteristics that are common with people that are associated with integrity. Among them are responsiveness, reliability, regularity, punctuality, accuracy, honesty, truthfulness, actions in alignment with statements, among others. But when I talk about integrity, I'm not talking about the moral aspects of it. By limiting the definition to doing just what you say you will do, it eliminates issues that otherwise might come up and muddy the waters of any issue that's at hand. It takes the righteousness out of the equation and reduces it to a simple form of, did you do what you said you would do? The third value is accountability. All people take personal responsibility to complete tasks they own as efficiently as possible and within measurable guidelines. Now, there are some subsets here of things that might appear as values with other people or with other companies or something like that, but among those are efficiency, effectiveness, measurable results, discipline, maximum effort, safety, responsibility. Accountability is different from responsibility, even though responsibility is in the definition. Accountability is that willingness to say, okay, I screwed up, and I'm not going to do that anymore, or at least I'm going to try to not do that anymore. That's accountability. So admit when you're wrong, and all of a sudden arguments that waste everyone's time as you might try to defend your actions disappear. You no longer have to defend your actions. You can just own up to them. Fourth is respect. All people understand differing opinions may exist on any given issue and act professionally and courteously without denigration or personal attack towards all, keeping the discussion focused on the specific issues at hand. Again, there are some subsets involved in this that you might see in other values that are similar, such as responsiveness, cleanliness, orderliness, tolerance, open-mindedness, trust, diversity, and accommodation. Respect, and the other side of that coin, disrespect, can take a lot of different forms. A lot of respect has to do with how you react when you feel disrespected. Do you become an outraged victim and attack the other person on their faults, or can you take the higher road? Let me give you an example. I live in a brand new community with an HOA, a homeowners association. My guess is you'll be hearing more about incidents from our HOA over time, since really it's been filled with examples related to alignment or a lack of alignment with some core values and principles and how best to interact with others. I'm looking forward to your comments or questions that are related to your lives and how to best interact with others. But since we're just starting this journey, I'll use something from my life to prime the pump. Again, please use that comments box to provide me examples of where you're being affected by this stuff. In our HOA, and again, that's Homeowners Association, in our HOA, at least so far as its development, as it's gone, we as a community are kind of struggling to find some common ground on a lot of different issues, but we're continuing to work on it. Recently, some of the parties with differing opinions decided to get together and hash out some of the issues. After a promise by a key player to attend the meeting on a date certain that was suggested by him and verified a few times over the course of a couple of weeks, I was looking forward to a good debate of the issues to find the common ground and make some logical conclusions. I was primed to use my effective communication tools to achieve that elusive mutual understanding. However, on the appointed date, that key person failed to show up. Now, we'll talk about the core value and principle of accountability in more detail in later episodes. Now, however, not only did I feel disappointment, but I also felt disrespected. So what do I do with that? Disrespect is a strong accusation, at least in my book. Now, I could chew on that disrespect like a dog on a bone and let it consume me and increase my stress levels, or I could try a different path. After all, the goal, the issue, is mutual understanding, and there are many ways to achieve that goal. So I compartmentalized the disrespect, maintained my focus on the actual issues at hand that were affecting the HOA, and moved forward with a different approach without losing sight of my core values and principles. I've let this key person know that I'm always available should he choose to engage, but I've left that up to him. So, while I disagree with this person's approach to resolving issues, which seems to be ignoring them, which I don't necessarily think is really healthy, I at least owe that person the respect to acknowledge his views and keep the doors open if he chooses to walk through it. The fifth is continuous improvement. All people strive to continually get better at their lives and their work. Now, there are subsets here too that you may see, such as learning environment or training, quality, excellence, innovation, and a willingness to change. This one is interesting in that most people don't like change. But if they were asked on a survey if they believed in continuous improvement, they'd say yes. Who can argue with continuous improvement? But by definition, if you're going to improve, you have to change, since you'll be doing something in a different way than you were before. That is change. It's more of an observation than anything, but if you really believe in getting better and improving every day, why would you at the same time fear change? Food for thought. As an aside, for businesses, I also add profitability to this list of core values, because if a business isn't profitable, then it won't be around long term to keep people gainfully employed. Now, while you generally shouldn't use the word being defined in the definition of that word, I define the concept of profitability as all people recognize the need for profitability to keep the company viable, and they strive to create conditions that result in profit. Now, some of those subsets are, again, efficiency, effectiveness, and each of the other 5 values that we just touched on. In essence, turning core values and principles into actions means that a business will be more profitable. I'm telling you, core values and principles have wide-ranging effects when they're actually used. Let's take another break of a length of your choosing. The magic of the pause button that you entirely control. Just a caution, though, remember that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Don't let that control go to your head. We're back, and since we've covered the core values, let's get into the core principles. The first one is effective communication. The definition here is that all people strive to achieve a mutual understanding among all relevant people about how any given issue will be approached in an open and honest environment. Subsets here include a lot of things like simplicity, identifying unspoken assumptions, standardization, uniform processes, systemization, cooperation, coordination, constructive criticism, freedom of inquiry without retribution, metrics, true prioritization, principles, and follow-up. That's just a short list of the subsets. We'll get more. But of all of the core values and principles, the number one to keep in mind is effective communication. It's the granddaddy of them all. You probably could have figured that out by the title of the podcast being Communicate Like This, and everything will work better for everyone. You could almost, and I said almost, throw out all of the other core values and principles because this one is so impactful in relieving miscommunication, misunderstandings, arguments, and stress. Most of the tools you'll be learning about in this series are related to effective communication. In fact, if you remember the 4 tools you learned from episodes 1 and 2, all of them linked back to effective communication. Remember, we're not after just communication. We're after effective communication. The second principle is true prioritization, defined as Priorities are few in number and have actions taken in proportion to the level of their priority. So if you employ true prioritization, it'll act as one of your best stress relievers. Again, we'll spend a lot of time later to expand on this concept, as with all of the core values and principles. The third principle is simplification. Efforts are made to make processes and procedures simple. It's kind of a given that the simpler your life is, the happier you are. Now, that assumes you've got the basics of life covered, like shelter, food, water, and other essentials. I wouldn't say that a homeless person has a stress-free life by any stretch of the imagination. As a teaser for an upcoming episode, we'll learn about Maslow's hierarchy of needs that lays out 5 stages on the path of true enlightenment. Now, I'm not going to get all woo-woo or kumbaya on you in this podcast for the most part, so don't think that's what you've gotten yourself into despite my reference to true enlightenment. I'm about practicality and action in the real world. Fourth, we have alignment with principles. That means that actions are taken in accordance with a defined set of principles and values. The key here is that while words are important, it's actions that tell the story. A question to keep at the forefront of your mind all the time is the action I'm about to take in alignment with the values and principles I believe in? Think back on my story about the HOA. Asking this question before taking action can save you a ton of bad consequences. Question yourself first before questioning others. Now, for those of you with a business mindset, again, I've got a bonus principle here. That's customer and employee satisfaction. This means that everyone strives to create conditions that optimize both customer and employee satisfaction in balance with a profitable and healthy business, including consistency and quality in actions. This is really a combination of teamwork and aligning with principles, but in a business environment, if you don't overtly state these things, they'll get lost, as you can see from the general state of business in the United States, maybe even the world. So, now you've got a set of core values and principles to work with. I'm not saying that these are absolutely the only ones or even that they're right for you, but I'd seriously question if you couldn't incorporate at least most of them into your life. My guess is that most of you already think you have these involved in your lives, but I would also guess that most of you haven't written them down or given much thought to their influence on your daily activities and interactions with others. The more you know them and understand them as being a big part of what makes you tick, the more you'll be able to use the practical tools you'll learn about in this podcast. Well, that about wraps it up for today. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please tell your friends about Communicate Like This. You can find the podcast on all major podcast sites like Apple, Google, and about 50 others, if not more. On the web, we're at communicatelikethis.com. There, you can also leave comments about any given podcast. You can also find more abbreviated conversations and interactions on our Facebook site at Communicate Like This. You'll also find occasional brief tips on Twitter. Just search for @RealDanPerky. If you're looking for something more substantive, please give my management book, Uncommon Sense Management, on Amazon a try. It's in both paperback and Kindle form. Now, if you think your business could benefit from some on-site training to not only make employees happier, but increase productivity and profitability, go to theopendoorgroup.com and see what we offer. Final reminder, though, before we go. Action is the key to success in reducing misunderstandings, miscommunication, preventable arguments, and stress. This isn't some academic exercise we're engaged in. If you don't actually use these tools in your personal interactions with people, then the whole podcast is just a waste of time. Now, don't expect to use all of the tools all at once every day. Have the self-awareness to find the opportunities as they arise and then pull out the appropriate tools and use them to get a true mutual understanding with folks. Like Marshawn Lynch said, it's all about that action, boss.